Let's give the ball some movement. There's some code that has been given to you. And at the top of this code are some instance variables. We'll go ahead and copy those instance variables. And we'll add them to the place where we put all of our instance variables at the top of our class definition before our constructor. Make sure that your code is properly aligned. And a rule of alignment is every time you have a curly bracket, you'll indent one tab or 4 spaces. Alright, let's copy the rest of this function. So it's a rather long function, so that's why I'm giving you the code. Remember to put your functions before the end of your class, but outside of any other function. So here's our public function ball movement. It has some if statements that check the ball's speed against current x speed of the ball. So we could say that this was the end of our ball movement function. Now when do we want that ball movement function to happen? We'd like it to check the ball movement on every frame that it enters. So in our timeline, remember that our timeline is made up of frames. And as we move through our game, we're going through a frame. We'll be going through 24 frames per second. So every time we enter one of those frames, so every 24 times a second, we want to call the ball movement function and have the ball check where it is on the screen and change where it should be on the screen. So we're going to have the ball add an event listener, the enter frame event. So for 24 frames a second, every frame, so 24 times a second, we're going to call this ball movement function. So this function here will be called 24 times a second. Computers are great at executing lots of functions very quickly. So it should have no problem executing this logic 24 times a second. It checks the ball's speed. It also checks if the ball has hit player. And if it's hit the player, then we haven't written this part yet, so I'm going to comment out that part. But it'll change its distance from the player. Alright. Making sure our variables match the variables that we named in our code. We'll save it and we'll test him. We'll make sure at the top of our package that we also import the library that we use inside of our hit test function. That library is listed here as the event class. So we need to make sure that we import that event class. The event class is in the Flash package, in the events package, and there's our class event. We'll go ahead and save our file, test our file. Our ball moves. When it hits the player object, it bounces off the player object. It knows the sides of our screen, but because we don't have an enemy object, it goes off the right of our screen and we'll keep on going that way. So our next task is to add our enemy object.